fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hey guys, Joe Simons, Like Diamonds, back again. This is a really special episode. I got my buddy Captain Jud Brock and my buddy Captain Johnny on this episode. A very, very special one, talking all about coastal rivers, especially for brackish water. They talk a lot about South Carolina here for obvious reasons. That's where Captain Johnny is. However, you can take these exact same principles and he throws down some really, really awesome secrets that I haven't even heard before. I learned a ton from this podcast myself that you can apply pretty much anywhere. So I hope you enjoy. If you haven't joined the Insider Club yet, what the heck are you waiting for? Someone to take you by the hand and show you where to fish every week and save you money in your tackle? Come join us over at saltstrong.com. Otherwise, enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Guide Report podcast. I'm your host, Captain Jud Brock. I'm a full-time guide in North Carolina and also host the Eastern Current Saltwater Fishing Podcast that can be found on all major podcast platforms. Today, I sit down with Captain Johnny Mainero of Blackwater Revival Guide Service in Georgetown, South Carolina. Captain Johnny is a shallow water fly and light tackle guide and is a great source of endless knowledge when it comes to the shallow water fish that call South Carolina home. His weekly guide reports for the Georgetown area can be found on the Salt Strong Insider Group. Hope y'all enjoy the episode. Captain Johnny, thanks so much for jumping on the Salt Strong Guide Report podcast with me. You're the first guide report podcast here on Salt Strong, and I'm excited to have you on as a friend, as a fellow Carolina angler. And we're excited to kind of chat about, or I'm excited to chat about the fishery you have there in Georgetown, which is pretty incredible. So thanks for hopping on with me.
Hey, thanks, Judd. I'm honored to be your first choice.
But you weren't I had so many choices before you. I'm just kidding. No, you were my first choice. I was like, Johnny's my guy, man. We've chatted together a lot, and I just knew you'd be a good first representation of what these Salt Strong guide reports and Salt Strong in general stands for. So I do appreciate you hopping on and doing this podcast with me.
Right on, man. Looking forward to it.
Well, man, let's start out. Let's get to know Johnny a little bit. Tell me your story, how you got into fishing, and how it's kind of brought you through your life to where you are now.
Cool. Well, my whole life has been centered around it. The water's been the focal point of my life since I've been my earliest thoughts. I grew up in the Northeast, Jersey. On the water. Dad always had a boat, so we kind of lived on the boat in the summertime in the marina, kind of like, your little floating trailer park. We lived in that thing all summer, and we did a lot of, it was basically the basis of our life between surfing or, catching little snapper blues. We called little bluefish snappers up north, little snapper blues in our little aluminum 12-foot game fisher. Catching crab bait. Like we always smelled like a bucket of rotten bait growing up, and it's kind of carried me through my entire life. Went from there, graduated into some offshore fishing, but then I really found my love for surf casting up there, and I striper fished religiously. All throughout my elementary school years through high school, and I didn't attend many parties in high school. I was usually hanging out with the chain smokers that were waiting on tide changes at the bridges in New Jersey, looking awesome. For striped bass. That's awesome. So kind of moved in from that, and this is like a brief synopsis. There's so much I could cover and fish in my life, but I moved to South Carolina in 2010. And for school, I went to Coastal Carolina, and the next closest thing that we had to stripers was obviously redfish and speckled trout, and basically did a lot on foot here at first. I didn't have any connections, just kind of like fished with some club guys at school, and just bumped around, try to find fish anywhere I could, and started working for a large fly fishing retailer. Was a fishing manager for them throughout college, which opened a ton of doors for me. Got me in with some really great people, some great anglers, and introduced me to the fishery I now guide in. So I've always been predominantly a fly fisherman my whole life. Or artificial, their own plugs, but mostly fly fishing. So I met some really great people down here, and a couple guys took me under their wing. And I mean, when I worked for that retailer as a fishing manager, I put a lot of business into this fishery with clients of mine, linking them up with other guides. So that kind of like paved the way for me to start guiding here.
Yeah.
And, one of my buddies made a move out of town, and I kind of filled in and started working the thing. And here I am. I mean, I wouldn't trade it. It's the best ride to the office in the morning. And I don't know, something about that shoulder burn pulling a boat. I love it.
It's fun, man. The shallow water fishing is so intriguing. Not everyone gets a chance to do it, but really in a lot of fisheries up and down the East Coast, I feel like even for people that might not have a skiff or might not have a shallow boat, there's opportunity to fish shallow and to hunt and to sight fish. And I feel like it is, is a resource that should be tapped into by all anglers, because it's just it's a really fun way to fish. And it's not a numbers game a lot of days. Some days it is, but a lot of days it's about, the interaction you have with those fish. And I think as an angler overall, that's kind of what we're after, is those special moments of special interactions in the water. But being a shallow water fisherman myself, I do a lot of fishing just like you do, but man, it's so important to, to understand your fishery, your estuaries, the water that you're fishing. What about Georgetown do you feel like is so intriguing, and what makes it unique and different than other areas along the coast of South Carolina?
I love Georgetown's really, but Jud, you fished me here once before, and it's kind of like the first taste of the low country. You saw it driving down 17. It's like you hit Winyah Bay and you come over them bridges, and it's just a big, vast body of water. It's the first one you see probably from Wilmington to here. Yeah. There's just so many different environments to target these fish in. You can target the fish in the rivers. You can target the fish in the bay. You can target them up in the marsh, at the jetties. And short boat ride, you could be south to the Santee Delta, McClellanville, Cape Romaine. There's just a lot of opportunity available for you, and there's a lot of different fisheries within the fishery. And it could be technical, but once you kind of figure out what areas work in what situation, it could be unreal. I mean, it's an awesome place. It's just you gotta use your mind and get off the beaten path and cover water here, because we've got so much of it.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, I think that the cool thing about, you said this and it made me think, is the cool thing about redfish is the fact that you and I could both go out, fish the same general zone, the same day, same conditions, fish completely different types of areas, completely different ways, and both have successful days on redfish. You can kind of find your way in which you want to target those fish. And I feel like that Georgetown is one of those areas that does offer a large diversity of styles of fishing, of estuaries. I mean, you've got a bunch of freshwater rivers that run in. You've got, how many rivers actually hit that Winyah Bay or nearby it?
So if you not counting like the intercoastal waterway going out towards the Delta, we've got the Great PD, the Waccamaw, which is the ICW, the Black River, and the Sandpit River, and they all kind of confluence like right in one little horn to basically the beginning of the bay. I mean, you rode through that little area with me. It could be a little gnarly right there, but that's all that water kind of hits the bay in that spot. It actually, I believe it's the fourth largest estuary by discharge at the Eastern Seaboard.
Wow,
which is pretty cool by discharge. Maybe not by square miles, but by water discharge into the bay.
Yeah. God, that's crazy. It's like a little mini Everglades minus the mangroves. I mean, with that much
Mhm.
fresh water coming in and then pumping out to the ocean, it's just such a great area. And I feel like why it's such a hot spot for shallow water fish, between, the multitude of different types of fish that y'all see there. What would you say is kind of your main focus species wise in the peak? Let's just talk about the peak months first, like the warmer months when you have the majority of different fish there. What are some of the fish that you like to go out after and target?
Obviously redfish are, kind of all of our best friends. They're pretty honest fish, for the most part.
I do love that about them. Until they're not. They're not honest.
Until they're not. I mean,
you're blown
you
away.
can will them. You can will them to eat until you can't anymore.
Right. Exactly.
I really like tarpon. They're just they're a difficult fish to target. The way we fish for them. But that's what I enjoy about them. But I really like the simplicity and the honesty of a redfish, especially for people that I fish with. They give good feedback, and they give good feedback, and I don't know, they're plentiful in a way. If you know where to find them, if you can make a cast at them, a lot of times they'll eat.
Yeah, for sure. They're do y'all get a pretty good push? I think we talked about this a little bit one time together, but do y'all get a push at triple tail in the summer down there?
We do.
Yeah,
they're kind of. I haven't. That's kind of like on my task radar for this summer. Is you know how it gets in the heat of the summer. Sometimes you got to give those backwater redfish a break when the creeks are 87 to 90 degrees and there's no oxygen. The triple tail, in the bay, you could find them. You just got to find a little structure that they'd be around
for sure.
And that's going to be kind of my target for the summer. Because I've had a couple followers this summer with fly guys that have made my heart drop into my stomach. They're just a cool fish, and they're kind of gnarly just to sight.
They're like a little
cool
prehistoric saltwater, or a massive prehistoric saltwater brim almost.
Yeah. It's like a tilapia.
Yeah, it's something you always look at him, you're like, what was that? And you look back, oh my gosh, it's triple tail.
I thought the first time I saw one following a topwater fly, I was like, it looked like a flounder. Like it was the way it was laying, it was surfacing on its side, and it looked like a dinner plate just swimming across the top of it. I'm like, is that flounder? And then now it was like two 8 to 10 pound triple tail. They were unreal. I mean, it was just the coolest thing to watch. And I was on the polling platform, and my man had the fly down current, so it wasn't the best drift either. And he pulled that fly like 2 feet from the boat, and those triple tails saw the boat. And it was over. But it was pretty cool to watch.
Heck
pretty cool to watch, though. Yeah.
Heck yeah. So when you are targeting redfish down there, let's talk light tackle, being a little more relatable to multiple people.
Yep.
But when you're targeting redfish down there, what are some of the key factors that you're looking for in that fishery? Because we all know redfish are the same fish no matter what body of water they're in, but there's definitely little nuances and cadences in different, pieces of water, different estuaries, different states that fish, hold on, or that might be unique to that area. What's some of the stuff that you're looking for a productive spot for redfish?
So if you're covering water, I think it kind of depends on the scenario you're looking for. But if you're covering water, I really like my favorite way to fish for them. Honestly, if I'm just covering and I'm not really sight fishing, I'm just kind of just trying to pick them off and find some new areas. I look for somewhat shallow grass line edges, and on a falling tide, like from the mid time of the tide cycle falling, when all like the bait fish start moving out of the grass. I like to just beat areas like that up, whether it be in the bay or in the marsh. It's a good way to find fish. If you don't know what you're looking for, and if you're not familiar with the area yet, you're not going to get yourself into a sticky situation, getting into some of these creeks that you might not have been in before when the tide's dropping, and you might not be able to get yourself out of.
Yeah.
So if you're new to the area, I recommend fishing. I've always had great success with it. Main creeks where the water's falling out of the grass. And you could keep it simple. Like I'll get a lot of guys just throwing a cork with a paddle tail or some sort of voodoo shrimp underneath of it just to cover water. And I mean, we have a lot of success that way from spring through summer. Yeah, it's an easy way to find fish.
Yeah, for sure. Cover water. I always relate it to how much presence does that bait have what kind of drawing power does that bait have when it's in the water? So I look at like just a small soft plastic, and I feel like it's got like a 3-4 foot maybe tops drawing power on fish.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to something like a topwater or a popping cork or gold spoon that's a little more presence, a little more flash, a little more noise for some of those baits,
mm-hmm.
and you can draw fish from further away. So like if you're going on a bank trying to pick it apart, trying to cover that bank quickly and efficiently, you might want to pick a bait that you don't have to cast every 6 feet to feel like you've covered the water well. One that you can throw every 10 to 12 feet might be a better option, if you're trying to
work how the tide's moving the current.
Yeah, for sure.
With the cork thing, I mean, some people kind of, don't really like to fish that way, but it's an easy way to cover a lot of the water
Definitely.
in one cast because, if you move that cork every like 5 to 7 seconds, I mean, it's going to move underwater probably 3/4 of that time, even after the cork stops.
Yeah.
So it's just suspending for a second, but you're picking that whole bank apart. It's a slow way to fish, but it's honestly, it's a slow way to fish, but I think, the bait's not in the water. And if you're casting overfish or passing fish, fishing too fast, I don't know. If you're picking it apart, I like to fish slow. That's kind of how I've always done it.
Yeah, for sure.
Might be a little more boring at first, but picking it apart, squeezes more juice out of the nut. You know?
As an angler that wants to learn, myself and anyone else out there, it's like, if you fish a spot slowly and thoroughly, you can check it off the list as either a spot that right now it does have fish or it doesn't. I mean, you're going to learn that spot well. If you rush through it quickly, you kind of leave something on the table, then maybe you're like, I need to go back and check that. If you really slow down and pick something apart well, you can write that spot off for a good week or two sometimes if there's not fish.
Yeah, and with a spot, a new spot you're fishing, man, like if you're fishing on one side of the tide and it's not good, fish on the other side of the tide before you write it off. Like, because there's spots here that will not hold fish on one tide. But on another tide, it's on. And you might get to the point where you're dissecting it to a certain level of tide height or a certain time in the fall or the rise where that spot is hot.
Definitely.
So, I mean, I think that you can't write off the spot until you fish it on both sides of the tide. That's
I agree. I agree. And I think, redfish in tidal areas, especially in the Carolinas, even into Georgia, I would say Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, man, there's specific spots where you will not see a redfish at the wrong tide. And then when the tide turns on, it could be the best spot, you've ever seen. I mean, there's spots I'm thinking about where the redfish fall off a bank, but as soon as that water hits that exact height that they like, every time it hits that, some days are better than others, obviously, but I mean, those fish funnel onto that bank because they're looking just like we are. We're looking for the most productive spot at the right time. They're doing the same thing as far as, and they're analyzing, a spot based off of what kind of food it's going to provide, what kind of, cover it's going to provide, and what kind of depth it's going to provide. I mean, there's a lot of reasons.
And depending on the time of the year too, you got to think like a fish, a fish in cold water if it's this time of year. That fish doesn't want to expend a lot of calories. The fish, I believe, knows by what they're eating how much nutrition they're getting out of that bait. Going back to the fish and flow thing, especially this time of year, if you do not present that bait to the fish where it's worth them eating, you're kind of null. So, change your cadence up too, because a little change can make a huge difference. We all know that.
Yeah. Anyone who's fished with me knows that I oftentimes say, you've got to make them feel like it's their idea. Like they're not going to eat it. Sometimes they will, but if you force it on them, to where it's not natural, a lot of times they're going to spook or blow off of it or not eat it. But when you make them feel like it's their idea and trigger that aggression, that predatorial, I've got to kill that, they're gonna eat it. And you got to, that's easy to break down when you're sight fishing, but that's something you got to think about happening under the water when you're not sight fishing. Like if you're going on a bank and there's a really productive looking little point with oysters on it, I'm not going to drag that. I'm not going to bomb that bait right onto where I think the fish is. I'm going to look at that and try to analyze it. And where should I drop that cast so that I can bring it across that fish per se? I don't know if he's there, to where I can make it feel like it's his idea, even if I can't see that fish.
Where you feel like where you think the fish would be.
For sure.
And I think that's super important. Like, it's just the presentation in any of our games is, even the bait fishing game could be a big deciding factor if you're going to do well or not.
Definitely.
If you're not, and I posted on Salt Strong yesterday, just kind of like a late, I think you might have saw it, but
I did, yeah.
Like a late winter redfish thing. It's like, when your bait's in the water, fish that bait. Like, if you're slacking and you're going through the motions and you're just reeling and chucking, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're wasting your time. Like, when that bait is in the water, make it work. Do something. Like, if you want to, if you're just going through the motions, step back and just think, like, why am I not catching fish, or why am I not getting meat? Like,
yeah,
maybe it's because your bait looks like a dead mullet rolling itself across the bottom. Like, think about what's going on in that water column, where you're at in the water column.
For sure, man. It's easy. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably spend a decent amount of time thinking about fishing. And I'm guilty of it too. I'll get out on the water and lose a little bit of confidence and then lose a lot of focus very quickly after that. It's so key on that time on the water to really stay focused and stay engaged and try to learn why or why not those fish are there and move accordingly. I mean, those minutes you get on the water, whether it's, multiple times a week or once or twice on the weekend, you really want to make them valuable. Whether you're catching fish or not, you at least need to be trying to learn. And so setting yourself up to learn, I feel like, is more important than setting yourself up to catch fish. And by doing that, fishing a diversity of spots and areas is going to be super helpful. And I think that's why I'm so drawn to Georgetown. It's like, there's so much to learn down there because there's so many different types of, redfish spots or cover, if you will. I mean, areas to fish. Now, I have a question for someone who I'm curious about access down there, because it's a very large area. And when I've been down there and fished with you, it seems like there's not a ton of access. Say someone wanted to come fish Georgetown from like a kayak or something like that. Is there productive water close to launches down there, or is a lot of the stuff a pretty decent hike to where you're fishing?
Kayak fishing would be tough in Georgetown just because of how long of a boat ride it is to get to our estuary.
Yeah.
But on the other side of the coin, there is a public landing in Georgetown that is on the Sandpit River. I can't remember the name of it, but it's like, if you type in public access Georgetown, it's like a 6-lane boat ramp, and you could fish the Sandpit River, which is one of the 4 rivers. And it's the smallest of the rivers. It's not a major river like the PD or the Waccamaw is. And if it's not the best after a rain, but like if you get a slight drought, great place to kayak fish. I'd recommend fishing it maybe on the falling tide or on the rising tide, and fish upriver. And then when the tide starts falling, fish down, because you don't want to be fighting that current. But from a skiff or a bay boat, there's plenty of different access points here. You got East Bay Park, which is a big landing. You got that public boat ramp on the Sandpit River. South Island Ferry, which is down, a little south of Georgetown proper, and they all kind of feed into Winyah Bay. So the South Island Ferry is easy to get to the Santee Delta too, from where it's at. It's pretty covered. For somebody who's new to coming here, definitely keep an eye on your weather. This place could get gnarly quick, so keep an eye on your weather. If we have a good chance of high winds and you want to fish, I would move towards the South Island Ferry boat ramp to fish the waterway down that way. You're pretty protected there. this bay is big. You've been on it. It's you get a hard east or a hard southeast wind. It could be gnarly. So just bear that in mind. Like, this is a very weather dependent fishery when it comes to safety. It's not, no sugarcoating. You want to make sure, you know, where you're going, or people know where you're going, or you're with somebody your first time here. I suggest fishing this place on a rising tide, like a low rising, the first time around, because outside the channel, it's not well marked. So, you know, fish it that way, run around that way, go slow. It's just a big body of water, with a lot of water that's outside the channel. So you just want to take it easy your first time here. Check the weather, check the winds. Don't get too creative, but just, you know, if the tide's starting to rise, you can, you know, it's better to sit for 30 minutes than 5 hours.
Yeah.
I've been on both sides of this coin. So
Definitely. I have as well. It's one thing to get stuck in a spot when there's enough water to still fish and there's fish around. It's another thing to get stuck in a spot when there's no water and no fish around. That's a very long sit.
Yeah, I've been there. Watch the tide water from the tide lap up against the hole, sitting on straight mud. Not long ago.
Yeah, it happens, man. That's part of exploring.
It happens, bro.
That's gonna be part of it. But man, that's it really is such a cool area down there in Georgetown, and so even being so close to where I am here in Wilmington, North Carolina, still so different. I mean, I kind of compare it to, feels a lot like the Cape Fear River mixed with the Pamlico Sound. You know, you've got that.
Mm-hmm.
That same type of estuary there. And you really have such a diversity. I mean, you get down by the inlets there and you've got the really tidal marsh creeks that you kind of, a lot of people know the low country as, and then you got those big main edges, you know, up in the bay that I do a lot of fishing on here in some of the non-tidal areas of North Carolina, where you get schools of fish waking and tailing and pushing down the bank. But man, I can't wait to get down and do some more exploring in that area. What would you say is the biggest draw to fishing the Georgetown area? Like, if someone called you and they were like, hey man, I want to book a trip, but I don't know if I should go to Charleston or Georgetown. I don't care about the nightlife. I don't care about anything else. I just want to fish. Why should I come to Georgetown?
Georgetown, one, we are not Charleston. We are not boat traffic heavy like everywhere else that's hot. Like, you know, that's on the map. We're not boat traffic heavy. We could still earn ourselves some spots without seeing any other boats, or we're not dealing with any other pressure. We have more water that's close to us and accessible than most places do. There's, you know, we can change directions quickly here. You know, not only can we do this, but we can do that. You know, like if one thing's not working, we can change directions really fast here. There's a lot of different things to do, a lot of different choices, a lot of different opportunities to have a successful day. And I think, you know, the whole battling the fellow angler is we don't have it as much. We're going to run across people, but we get a lot of water to ourselves down here, you know, and there's places that hold fish that people don't fish. And there's endless opportunity. And there's 3 different ecosystems within a 20 mile radius that you can get to from Winyah Bay, which is awesome.
I think that's what's so cool about that area to me, is that there's still secrets. There's still stuff that happens there, areas to fish, places to catch fish that you can have to yourself. You know, it's not like, you know, and not that I don't want people, you know, to go out and catch fish, but it's cool to have an area that hasn't been, you know, and I think that's the benefit to where you are, is you're not right on like a major city, but you're close enough. You got a plenty going on there. There's plenty to do in Georgetown, but you're far enough away from everything that it's not too heavily, you know, fished. It's an area that's still, there's still stuff to pioneer there, if you will.
There is. And like, I know you said a client that wouldn't care about the nightlife. Our little historic Georgetown is an unbelievably awesome place too. I mean, it's such a cool place to just, you know, you get off the water, there's the salty old bar, you can go hang out, drink a beer in a can, or you can, you know, you can go to a nice dinner, or you could, you know, just bum around on the street. It's a cool place to be. there's not many places I've ever been that's like it.
Didn't you say that they're building a boardwalk down there, like a pretty big project as far as?
Oh, they're building like it's gonna be like a fish camp. So this is something for y'all. It's in very early stage right now. But they're building like this like fish camp, and it's gonna have like these little bungalows that you can rent out on the PD River.
Oh, sweet.
And and there's a little dock access there. So probably in the next year and a half, 2 years, you'll probably see it like be complete. They already put the dock in, so it's actually good for us too, because I think it's gonna help us some guides here. And it's gonna be like a whole, it's gonna be a really awesome setup.
Yeah, that's super cool. That'll be super fun. I'm excited to come down and check that out. This time of year, we're in February. What's going on down there right now? If someone were to come fish with you or come fish themselves in Georgetown, what's happening right now? And as far as like productive fishing goes in Georgetown?
Right now, productive for me is schooling fish, like just schooling fish. There is some pressure on these fish now, but if we're going to go, it's going to be a low tide scenario or a falling tide scenario. That's a pretty confident thing for me right now. I haven't trout fished a lot this winter, which kind of stinks because I love trout fishing. Just I haven't had a lot of people everyone wants to catch redfish,
right? Which
is cool. But I mean, like low tide schooling redfish is kind of like the confidence thing this time of year. We can make it happen most days, like have a multiple fish day.
Yeah, heck yeah. That's the schooling redfish in the Carolinas in the winter, and Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina really is just a hard one to beat. I mean, they get wadded up when the water temperatures cool off a little bit, and you get a warmer day like today, and they get fired up and chew super hard. And catching fish on topwater up here, at this time of year and these type of weather patterns, you get this fish.
Are you catching them on topwater right now?
If you get a couple warmer days, try throwing it.
Yeah,
it's like you'll at least always get followed. But then all of a sudden one day they'll just be smoking it. February is a great time of year here in North Carolina for topwater, like big topwater.
I do love low tide fishing, but watching a redfish eat a plug or a trout eat a plug is probably one of the most charging things that I ever see happen in my life. I love watching topwater eat,
especially when it's sloppy, when they kind of miss it a few times and then come back and finish it off.
I love when redfish, they look kind of dumb when they go to eat a plug. They miss it 2 or 3 times.
They're pushing it up on their forehead. Like, whoa.
Yeah, what are you doing? Like batting it out, and they come back for more. That's what I love about it.
When they decide they want to kill something, they go for it.
And this is the tip. If you're fishing plugs and that fish misses that plug, don't stop it. Keep it moving.
Keep it moving.
If you stop that plug, you're probably going to lose the fish's interest. But if you keep it moving, it'll come back.
That's very true. Very, very true. Well, Johnny, thanks for doing the first Salt Strong Guide Report podcast here with me. If people want to look up your website, and I go ahead and share it here on the podcast so people can find you if they want to in the Georgetown area.
My website is fishingblackwater.com. It's Blackwater Revival Guide Service. Fish Blackwater at Fish Blackwater is my Insta boy handle.
Nice.
You go on my website, you got details about the area, booking info. I like to write, so I have a good blog on there. I love to write and share my blog. So you can find everything on my website.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. And Johnny's also doing the weekly guide reports on the Insider Salt Strong Insider page, where you can kind of keep up with what's happening week to week there in Georgetown, and he does a great job of that. And I'm always listening to it, wishing I was a little further south. But the grass is always greener. We've had a really good winter here in North Carolina. A lot of big schools of redfish and some great sight fishing. So I just like it. I like exploring. I'm just too obsessed with exploring new stuff, which excites me so much about this guide report podcast, is picking the brain of guides.
I live through you sometimes. I live through you on YouTube. Sometimes you get to fish some pretty cool places this winter.
I try to keep it interesting. It's always got to be a quick leave after the kids go to bed one night, drive 6 hours, because I'm usually leaving at 8 o'clock in the evening. 6 hours is about max driving. I'll spend the night, get up, fish, and then come back. So anywhere I can hit with.
But what I do like about how you do it, mostly it's not like your conventional fishing. It's you're tackling something that not everyone does every day, or you're going somewhere where, like when you fished with in the Pamlico Sound, that was unbelievable.
That was fun.
That was an unbelievable episode to just watch. So.
It's cool to kind of try to go figure stuff out. That's kind of my passion. Like I said, the exploration of the unknown, at least the unknown for me. And, that's fun. But man, if you want to fish Georgetown, definitely hit up Johnny. Johnny, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. Excited to keep up with you there on the Salt Strong Insider page. And man, I hope you have a good afternoon. Get out there and catch some fish.
Appreciate you, dude. And appreciate y'all for tuning in.
Well, guys, we will see y'all on the next Guide Report podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. Find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. For he's the reason why we are this way. And he put fishing in our soul.